Good, I have the full transcript. Now I'll write the new story applying all the formulas from the analysis. For 6 years, I worked 2 jobs so my wife could get her law degree. The day she passed the bar, she handed me divorce papers and said, "I belong in boardrooms, not in a life with a repairman. You were always beneath me." I said nothing. I just smiled. At the hearing, her own attorney went pale when I opened my briefcase. The judge looked at the evidence and said, "Counselor, your client just argued against herself." My wife gripped the table so hard her knuckles turned white. Then she fainted. My name is Harold, and I'm 63 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed that if you gave a person everything you had, your time, your money, your labor, your love, that they would honor what that meant. I was wrong about that in the most expensive way a man can be wrong. Let me go back to the beginning, because what happened at that hearing didn't start in a courtroom. It started in an adult education classroom at a community college on a Tuesday night in September, almost 8 years before the day that changed everything. I had signed up for a small business accounting course because my auto body shop had gotten busy enough that I needed to understand the books better. I was 55 years old, had owned my shop for 19 years, and had built it from nothing. Just me, a rented bay, and a used spray gun. By the time I walked into that classroom, I had 12 employees, a decent property, and a reputation for the best collision restoration work in the county. She was sitting in the 3rd row. Her name was Vivian. She was 38, sharp-featured, quick with a laugh, and she carried herself with the kind of ambition that fills a room before a person finishes walking into it. She was taking the course because she wanted to go to law school and needed a basic accounting background for the application essays. She told me that on the first night, like it was a fact she was proud of announcing. Not bragging, just stating the future out loud, the way some people do when they've already decided it's inevitable. We got coffee after the 3rd class. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became weekends. 6 months after that first Tuesday night, she moved into my house on Crescent Hill Road, and we were married in my backyard in front of 40 people who all said they'd never seen me look so happy. They were right. I hadn't been. My first marriage had ended years earlier, not dramatically, just quietly 2 people who had grown into different shapes and were honest enough to admit it. My daughter, Renee, was grown and working as a school teacher in Oregon. My life before Vivian had been full, but orderly in the way that empty drawers are orderly. She changed that. She had energy and opinions and plans, and I loved all of it. "I need to do this," she told me, maybe a month after the wedding. We were sitting on the back porch, and she had a law school brochure open on her lap. "I've been waiting my whole life to do this. I know the timing is complicated, but apply," I told her. "We'll figure it out." The look on her face that evening is something I held onto for a long time. Pure gratitude, pure excitement. She put her arms around me and said, "Harold, I will not waste this. I promise you I will not waste what you're giving me." She got into Hargrove Law, one of the better regional schools in the state, starting the following fall. Tuition was $41,000 a year. 3 years, plus a 4th year she needed after transferring to take additional courses in corporate law because her career goals had shifted. She had decided she wanted to be a mergers and acquisitions attorney, working with major firms and big money clients. I supported that decision the way I had supported every other one. The total, when it was done, $179,000. Every tuition bill, every bar prep course fee, every set of casebooks, every professional wardrobe item she said she needed for internships and moot court competitions. I know the number exactly because I kept every receipt in a manila folder inside my filing cabinet at the shop, labeled with her initials and the year. I am a methodical man. I always have been. During those 4 years, I worked 6 days a week. I stopped taking vacation. I pushed back a planned renovation on the shop's paint booth because the capital reserve I'd been building had been redirected. I ate breakfast at my desk most mornings and went to bed most nights with the particular kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for a very long time. But I didn't mind. I was proud. Every time Vivian called me from campus and said she'd done well on an exam or nailed a practice argument in front of her professor, I felt it like it was my own accomplishment. We were a team, she and I. At least, I believed we were. The morning she passed the bar examination, I had a cake made at the bakery on Elm with her name and Esquire written on it in green frosting. I brought it to the house and set it on the kitchen table with a card that took me an hour to write because I kept starting over, unable to find words big enough for what I felt. When she got home, she saw the cake and laughed and hugged me, and we opened a bottle of champagne I'd been saving since our wedding. It was one of the best evenings I can remember. That was a Friday. On the following Tuesday, she sat down across from me at the kitchen table with a manila envelope in her hand and the expression of someone who had rehearsed what they were about to say. "I need you to look at these," she said, sliding the envelope toward me. I opened it. Inside were divorce papers, already prepared by a firm called Larkwood and Ellison, attorneys at law. I sat there holding those papers for a long time, not saying anything. Then I looked up at her. "Is there something you want to tell me? I've been thinking about this for a while." Her voice was measured, composed. Not unkind exactly, but not soft either. The way a person sounds when they've moved past the emotion of a decision and are now just executing it. We want different things. We always have. I just didn't fully understand that until now. "Different things," I repeated. Harold. She folded her hands on the table. "I'm going to be at a major firm. I'm going to be doing high-level work with high-level people. My world is changing. And yours?" She paused, choosing her words with the precision of someone who had just spent 4 years learning to choose words precisely. "Yours isn't. You have your shop. That's wonderful. But I belong in boardrooms, not in a life with a repairman. You were always beneath me. I just needed the time to be honest with myself about it." I looked at this woman who had eaten dinner at my table every night for over 5 years, who had slept in my bed, who had put her arms around me, and said she would not waste what I gave her, and I realized something quietly and completely. She had never loved me. Or if she had, it was the kind of love that a person feels for a useful thing, a car that starts reliably, a coat that keeps out the cold. Functional. Temporary. "Fine," I said. That was all I said. "Fine." She looked surprised. She had braced herself for something else, pleading, maybe, or an argument. When I just said fine and folded the papers back into the envelope, she blinked twice, then collected herself and said the attorneys would be in touch. That evening, after she had gone to bed, I sat in my shop alone for 2 hours. Not crying. Not angry. Just thinking. Because something she had said was nagging at me in a way I couldn't fully articulate yet. She said she had been thinking about this for a while. Not weeks. A while. And the divorce papers were already prepared, already sitting in an envelope from a firm I had never heard of. A firm that, when I looked them up on my phone that night, charged a $400 hourly rate. Vivian did not have $400 an hour. She had just passed the bar. She had no job yet, no income, no savings of her own to speak of, because every dollar we had gone into her education. Someone was paying for those attorneys. And whoever it was, they had the retainer money ready before the bar results were even published. I called my attorney the next morning. His name was Doug Farrell, a man I had known for 20 years who handled contracts and property law for small businesses in our area. He was not a divorce attorney, but he was smart and careful, and he referred me to his colleague Janet Moss, who was. "Harold," Janet told me after reviewing the papers, "whoever is representing her is good. They've filed preemptively on almost every point of contention. You need to start building your defense immediately." "What kind of defense?" "We need documentation of every dollar you spent on her education. We need to establish that those funds came from marital assets, which means she may have an obligation to address them in the settlement. But more importantly," she paused, "who do you think is funding her legal representation?" I told her I didn't know for certain, but I had a suspicion. 3 weeks before the bar results came out, I had come home early from the shop on a Wednesday afternoon because one of my guys had cut himself on a piece of sheet metal, and I had driven him to urgent care and then decided to come home instead of going back. When I pulled onto Crescent Hill Road, there was an unfamiliar car in my driveway. A dark green BMW. I didn't recognize it, and when I went inside, Vivian was in the kitchen, and the back door was slightly open, and I heard footsteps on the back porch going down the steps. "Who was that?" I asked. "Nobody." She didn't look at me. Colleague from the bar prep program. We were just reviewing some notes. I didn't push it. I should have. After seeing the divorce papers, I hired a private investigator named Carl Briggs. He was a retired county sheriff's deputy who had been doing independent investigative work for 11 years. Methodical, discreet, and as it turned out, exactly the right person for what needed to be found. 2 weeks after I hired him, Carl came to the shop and closed the door to my office. Her name for the last 7 months, off the record, he said, has been Vivian Larkwood. I stared at him. Larkwood. As in Larkwood and Ellison, the firm representing her in your divorce. He set a folder on my desk. His name is Preston Larkwood. He's the founding partner. 61 years old, twice divorced, currently separated from his second wife. He's worth approximately $4.2 million in assets between the firm, a vacation property in South Carolina, and various investment accounts. How long has this been going on? Carl was quiet for a moment. Based on what I can document, at least 14 months. Possibly longer. They've been careful. 14 months. She had been with him for 14 months while I was still paying her bar prep fees. While I was working Saturdays. While I was telling everyone who asked that I was proud of my wife. There's something else, Carl said. He opened the folder and pushed a single document toward me. It was a lease agreement. She signed a lease on a condo 3 months ago. Deposit paid by a company called PL Holdings LLC. That LLC is registered to Preston Larkwood. She had a place to go before she had even handed me the papers. She had planned the exit the way you plan a move, finding the new apartment first, then packing the boxes. I sat with that information for several days. I was 61 years old. I had worked my entire adult life. I had survived a first divorce, raised a daughter mostly on my own during her teenage years, built a business from nothing in a rented bay, and I had done all of it with the belief that also, if you showed up and worked hard and gave what you had, it was enough. That it meant something. Vivian had looked at everything I had built and decided it was raw material. Something to be used and converted into something more suitable for her. But there was still the question of what I was going to do about it. The answer came the following Thursday, the day one of my longest tenured employees, a body man named Eugene, walked into my office, holding a piece of equipment I didn't immediately recognize. Harold, he said, did you know one of those little wireless cameras is still running in the shop waiting room? I had installed 4 small cameras in the shop 18 months earlier after a parts theft. I'd put one in the garage bay, one over the register, one outside the back door, and one in the waiting room, because we occasionally had customer belongings left unattended. After we caught the parts thief and terminated him, I had removed 3 of the cameras. Apparently, I had forgotten the one in the waiting room. Still recording? I asked. Still uploading, Eugene said. Cloud account you set up. Probably got 18 months of footage on there. I looked at him for a long moment. Eugene, I said, you never told me this. He smiled. Told you what, boss? That night I sat at my kitchen desk and logged into the cloud storage account. What I found in those recordings changed the shape of everything. For the first several weeks I reviewed, there was nothing unusual. Customers waiting. Eugene bringing people coffee. Normal days. But 4 months back, something changed. It started with a single Tuesday afternoon. Vivian had come to the shop. She stopped in occasionally, picking up my truck when her car was in for service and she had not been alone. The man with her was tall, broad-shouldered, well-dressed in the casual, expensive way that people in his income bracket dress when they're trying to seem relaxed. He stood in my waiting room while Vivian went to get the truck keys from the back, and he looked around slowly, the way a buyer looks at property. That was Preston Larkwood. Over the next 3 months, he appeared in the footage 4 more times. Each time, he had come with Vivian. Each time, he walked through my waiting room with the proprietary ease of a man who was already calculating what something was worth. But the recording that mattered most was from 6 weeks before Vivian handed me the divorce papers. It was a Saturday and I had been at the shop since 7 a.m. Vivian had come in at noon saying she needed to use the office printer because her home printer was out of ink. The camera in the waiting room did not cover the private office directly, but it covered the hallway, and it captured audio clearly from that angle. What I heard, for 11 minutes and 40 seconds, was Vivian on a phone call. She spoke to someone, a woman, based on the fragments of response I could make out, and she walked back and forth in the hallway while she talked, completely unaware of the camera. "The timing has to be exactly right," she said at one point. "I need the bar results in hand first. Once those come through, I file the next week. Preston has the papers ready. His team has already identified every asset Harold has that can be claimed as joint property." A pause. "I know it took longer than I planned. 4 years. But the degree is worth it. Once I'm at the firm, I'll be billing at $300 an hour within 18 months. He just needed to be kept comfortable long enough to write the checks." Another pause, and then she laughed. It was a laugh I had never heard from her before in 5 years of marriage. Cool and certain, the laugh of someone who is not entertaining any doubt. He's not going to fight it. He's the type who thinks accepting things gracefully makes him noble. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him and go back to fixing cars. That's what he's good at. That's all he's ever been good at. I listened to that recording 7 times. What she was describing was not a marriage that had grown apart. It was not two people who had wanted different things. It was a transaction she had designed from the beginning, with a beginning, a middle, and an exit strategy already mapped, before she had ever sat down across from me in that accounting class. She had come into that classroom looking for me. Or looking for someone like me, stable, hard-working, older, with assets worth converting. And she had found me. I made a copy of the recording to a thumb drive and put it in the same filing cabinet where I kept the tuition receipts. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a Thursday, 4 months after she had handed me the papers. Janet Moss had done excellent preparation work, but Vivian's team had filed 15 separate motions in the intervening weeks, many of them designed to delay and complicate. They requested spousal support of $3,000 a month. They attempted to reclassify my shop as a joint marital asset on the grounds that Vivian had occasionally done administrative work there. She had twice helped with a spreadsheet and were seeking a 40% equity stake in the business I had built over 19 years. They filed a motion claiming I had engaged in financial coercion by controlling the family finances during her education. My shop. 19 years of my life. She wanted 40% of it, funded by my own money, managed by her new partner's law firm. The morning of the hearing, I got up at 5:30 and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in the quiet. Then I put on my good suit, the dark charcoal one I had bought for Renee's college graduation 12 years ago, and I drove to the courthouse with my briefcase in the passenger seat. Janet met me on the steps. She looked calm but focused. "Remember the sequencing," she said. "Let them present first. Let them build the frame. Then we take it apart." The courtroom was on the 4th floor. It was a Tuesday morning room. Standard fluorescent light, wood veneer on everything, the particular institutional stillness of a place where things are decided without ceremony. Vivian was already at the plaintiff's table when we entered, sitting beside a woman named Patricia Wells from Larkwood and Ellison. Patricia was perhaps 50, silver-haired, and wore the expression of someone who had won many of these and expected to win this one. Preston Larkwood was not in the courtroom. He was, of course, too directly involved to be seen there. But I knew he was waiting. He had structured the legal assault on my business and my savings with the care of a man protecting his own investment. Vivian looked at me once when I sat down briefly with the polished composure of someone who had prepared for this moment. She was dressed beautifully. She looked every inch the new attorney. Judge Walter Hines entered, and we stood. He was a compact man in his late 60s with reading glasses he kept pushing up his nose and the manner of someone who found delays personally offensive. Janet had told me he was known for running tight hearings and for a particular impatience with what he called theater. Patricia Wells presented Vivian's case first. It was polished and well constructed. She painted a picture of a woman who had pursued her education under difficult circumstances, with a controlling spouse who had managed every financial decision. She used the phrase financial gatekeeping 4 times. She described Vivian as having emerged professionally, only to find herself in a marriage that was incompatible with her growth. She presented projections of Vivian's future earnings and argued that a period of spousal support would allow her to stabilize while establishing herself at the firm. The firm. Preston Larkwood's firm. Where she was already working, already being paid. I watched Vivian nod at appropriate moments, her expression carefully constructed. She was good at this. She had 4 years of training in it. When Patricia finished, Judge Hines looked at Janet. "Counsel for the respondent?" Janet stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. Before responding to the claims raised by the petitioner, we'd like to present a motion of our own. The respondent requests that this court consider evidence material to the nature of this marriage and the petitioner's stated claims of financial hardship." Patricia Wells was already rising to object, but Judge Hines held up a hand. "What kind of evidence?" "Documentary evidence and audio recordings, Your Honor, obtained legally from equipment installed in the respondent's business property and in the respondent's residence with the petitioner's knowledge." Vivian's composure did not shatter, but it moved. I saw a slight tightening around the eyes, a fractional stillness in the jaw. She had not accounted for the shop camera. She had forgotten it, or never known it was still running. "I'll allow it," Judge Hines said. "Present it properly." Janet first walked through the financial documentation. The tuition records, the loan papers, the year-by-year breakdown of the $179,000, every disbursement documented with dates and receipts, my handwriting on the folders, receipts going back 6 years. "The petitioner has claimed financial hardship and spousal coercion," Janet said. "These records show that every dollar of marital capital during the marriage was directed toward the petitioner's education. The respondent liquidated a retirement account in year 3. She placed that document before the judge. He deferred capital reinvestment in his business for 4 consecutive years. Another document. He has been operating at reduced personal income since the marriage began." Patricia objected twice. Both objections were overruled. Then Janet introduced the audio recording. She gave a brief explanation of its origins, the business security camera, the cloud storage, the circumstances of discovery, and then she played 11 minutes and 40 seconds of Vivian's voice in my shop hallway, speaking with perfect clarity about the transaction she had designed and the exit she had already planned. "I need the bar results in hand first. He just needed to be kept comfortable long enough to write the checks. He's not going to fight it. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him and go back to fixing cars." The courtroom was absolutely still during the playback. I watched Judge Hines. He was not a demonstrative man, but his expression tightened progressively from the first sentence to the last. When the recording ended, he removed his glasses and set them on the bench in front of him, which Janet had told me he did when he was about to make a significant ruling. He looked at Patricia Wells. "Counselor," he said, "your client has argued in this proceeding that her husband engaged in financial control and coercion during her education. She has claimed hardship and manipulation. She has requested 40% of a business he built 19 years ago." He paused. "Your client just described that same husband as someone she needed to keep comfortable long enough to write the checks, in her own words, on a recording made in his own property." Another pause. "Counselor, your client just argued against herself." Patricia Wells opened her mouth and closed it again. Vivian gripped the edge of the table in front of her, both hands, knuckles tightening. "I'm going to ask the petitioner directly," Judge Hines said, looking at Vivian over his folded glasses. "Is there anything in that recording that was taken out of context or misrepresented?" Vivian's attorney reached for her arm, but Vivian had already started to stand. She got halfway up from her chair, her face the color of printer paper, and then her legs simply did not hold. She went down sideways, catching the edge of the table on the way, and the bailiff was moving before she had finished falling. There was a moment of chaos, Patricia Wells calling for a recess, the bailiff and a court officer moving toward Vivian, Judge Hines banging his gavel once and calling for order. I sat at my table with my hands flat on the surface and did not move. Janet leaned close to me. "Stay still," she said quietly. "Let it settle." The recess lasted 22 minutes. When we reconvened, Vivian was back in her chair, pale and composed in the way of someone who has decided that composure is their last remaining resource. The court physician had cleared her to continue. Judge Hines looked at the room for a long moment. "The motion for spousal support is denied," he said. "The motion regarding business equity is denied. The petitioner's claims of financial coercion and hardship are not supported by the evidence presented and are, in fact, contradicted by it." He looked at his notes. The court finds that the respondent provided substantial financial support for the petitioner's education over a period of 6 years, totaling $179,000, drawn from marital assets. The court orders that the settlement reflect this contribution. He then looked directly at Vivian. The court is also referring this matter to the State Bar's Ethics Review Board, as the recording introduced today raises serious concerns about the petitioner's fitness as an officer of the court. He glanced at the documentation regarding Preston Larkwood's involvement. This referral will include a review of the circumstances of the petitioner's employment at the firm currently representing her and the relationship between that employment and the initiation of this proceeding. He set down his glasses again. This court is adjourned. In the weeks that followed, the State Bar began its review. What they found expanded the investigation considerably. Vivian had used Preston Larkwood's office resources to prepare her divorce filings during her first month of employment. She had billed client hours to cover work done on her personal legal matter. 3 other associates at Larkwood and Ellison came forward during the review with concerns about similar practices. Preston Larkwood, whose own conduct in using firm resources to manage his personal relationship with an employee was deeply problematic under bar ethics rules, faced a separate proceeding. Vivian's license to practice law was suspended pending the investigation. She would not be billing at $300 an hour within 18 months. She would not be billing at anything. Janet called me when the suspension was issued. She was professional and measured on the phone, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath it. She had one job to do, Janet said, and she did it in a room with a running camera while telling someone she wasn't going to fight. The irony is not small. It wasn't. I drove back to the shop that afternoon and walked through it slowly. The spray booth I had deferred renovating. The new lift I had finally bought. Eugene in Bay 3 with his radio turned to classic country, working a dent out of a quarter panel with the patient focus of someone who takes broken things seriously. I had built this. 19 years. It had not been glamorous or prestigious. I had never been introduced at dinner parties as someone impressive. I had permanent grease in the lines of my knuckles that soap couldn't fully reach, and I drove a pickup truck with 200,000 miles on it, and I ate lunch at my desk most days. Vivian had decided that made me beneath her. She was wrong about that. She had been wrong about most things. 6 months later, Renee drove down from Oregon for a weekend, and we sat on the back porch of the house on Crescent Hill Road, my house, just mine now, and I told her everything. The whole story. She was quiet for a long time after. "Are you okay, Dad?" she finally asked. I thought about it. Truthfully. "I'm better than I've been in years," I said. She looked at me carefully the way daughters look at fathers when they're deciding whether to believe them. "Really?" I said. "I know who I am." "That's not nothing." She nodded slowly, then leaned over and put her head on my shoulder the way she had when she was 12 years old and the world was simpler. "No," she said. "That's not nothing at all." I sat on that porch until the light faded and the neighborhood went quiet and the crickets started up in the dark. I thought about what it means to give someone everything and have them decide it wasn't worth keeping. I thought about what it takes to still be standing after that. I am 63 years old. My hands are rough and my back aches by Thursday, and I drive a truck that I will probably never replace. I fixed things for a living my entire life: bent metal, cracked frames, damage that other people assumed was permanent. I pressed it back into shape and made it right. That is not a small thing. It was never a small thing. Vivian had called me a repairman like it was an insult. She had said it to make me feel small, to make me feel like what I did and who I was had no value in the world she was building for herself. But she had built that world on a recording she forgot existed, in a room she thought was empty, talking to someone she trusted not to listen. I had been listening. I had always been paying attention. And in the end, the only thing she had managed to build on my back, the degree, the license, the career she lost in a courtroom, where her own voice proved she had never deserved any of it. I am a repairman. That means when something is broken, I fix it. And I fix this. Giving everything you have to someone isn't weakness, it's evidence of character. Harold lost money, years, and the version of his life he thought he was building. But he kept the one thing no one could take, the kind of man he was. He showed up honestly, documented carefully, and when the moment came, He let the truth speak for itself. The people who underestimate quiet, steady workers are usually the ones who end up proving them right. A small note to our viewers. This story was created and imagined by AI, crafted to bring you an entertaining listen, and hopefully, a thought worth carrying with you into your day.